Hello,
Oh.
everyone.
Aw.
As you come into the
Tim,
room,
Jed.
thanks for making the time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Southwest Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We're omitting another person here. We've been in Multnomah Village for 43 years now. Ooh. We're open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., weekends 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Our website is always open. You can shop day and night at annieblooms.com. I am going to put into the chat the link for the event where you can buy both authors' books from us. We'd really appreciate it. We have curbside pickup, in-store pickup, local delivery in the Portland area, and also a couple of different shipping options for those of you who aren't in the local area. And author Sonia Thomas, who we had recently, is now joining us. Sorry to put a spotlight on you, Sonia. Welcome. Sonia Thomas, everybody. We have some great events coming up on Thursday, May 19th at 7 p.m. Local author Miriam Forster will be live stream reading and PowerPoint presentation from her new book for middle grade readers, Sharks, A Mighty Bitey History. I love that title. Mm-hmm. On Tuesday, May 31st, we're going to have our first in-store event in years. Pacific Northwest author Emiko Jean reading from her new YA novel, Tokyo Dreaming, which is a sequel to Tokyo Ever After. And more events coming up in June and beyond. You can check our website for those. Tonight, we have Portland middle grade author Jenn Reese with her second novel, Every Bird a Prince. She's going to be in conversation. I forgot to ask Greg how to pronounce his last name, Greg van
Eekhout.
Eekhout? Mm-hmm. All right. He's the author of Weird Kid. We'll have a Q&A at the end. You can feel free to type questions into the chat. I'll be happy to read them to the authors, or you can click on the little hand icon that's in the reactions menu down there at the bottom of the screen. And if you dare to come on screen and ask a question live, let me tell you about Every Bird a Prince. A girl's quest to save a forest kingdom is intertwined with her exploration of identity. In Every Bird a Prince, a gorgeous middle grade contemporary fantasy by Jenn Reese, the award-winning author of A Game of Fox and Squirrels. The only time Erin Evers feels like herself is when she's on her bike racing through the deep woods. While so much of her life at home and at school is flying out of control, the muddy trails and the sting of wind in her face are familiar comforts. Until she rescues a strange magical bird who reveals a shocking secret. Their forest kingdom is under attack by an ancient foe, the vile Frost Fangs, and the birds need Erin's help to survive. Let's admit another person more in the middle of this. I'll leave you hanging. Erin's help to survive. 7th grade is hard enough without adding Bird Champion to her list of after school activities. Lately, Erin's friends seem obsessed with their crushes and the upcoming dance, while Erin can't figure out what a crush should even feel like. Still, if she doesn't play along, they may leave her behind, or just leave her altogether. Then the birds enlist one of Erin's classmates, forcing her separate lives to collide. When her own mother starts behaving oddly, Erin realizes that the Frost Fangs, with their insidious whispers, are now hunting outside the woods. Yikes. In order to save her mom, defend an entire kingdom, and keep the friendship she holds dearest, Erin will need to do something utterly terrifying. Be brave enough to embrace her innermost truths, no matter what the cost. Jenn Reese writes speculative fiction for readers of all ages. She's the author of A Game of Fox and Squirrels, an NPR Best Book of 2020, a finalist for the Andre Norton Award and Mythopoeic Award, and winner of the Oregon Book Award. Her other publications include Above World Trilogy and numerous short stories and essays. Jenn lives in Portland, Oregon, where she makes art, plays video games, and talks to the birds. Greg van Eekhout is the author of 10 novels, including Voyage of the Dogs, Cog, and Weird Kid. His work has been included on the New York Public Library's Best Book for Children's list. For more information, visit his website, writingandsnacks.com. Such a great website. From the author of Cog and Voyage of the Dogs, Weird Kid is a hilarious and heartfelt homage to everyone who feels they don't belong. So welcome, Jenn and Greg.
Thank
you so much, Michael. Thanks for having us here. Thanks to everyone who showed up tonight. I recognize almost every name, and I feel like this is just going to be sort of a party with people I care a lot about. So yay, thank you.
Don't you wish we had pizza? Wouldn't it be awesome if we all had pizza?
Maybe we all do.
I don't have pizza. So here are some nice things that people have said about A Game of Fox and Squirrels. Reese's pairing of a realistic depiction of lived trauma with its allegorical fantasy reflection proves stunningly effective, beautifully written. That is a starred review from Kirkus, of all places. And Publishers Weekly, in a starred review, says a poignant, fantastical allegory that presents generational trauma and its echoes unflinchingly. So, and then, yeah, you won the administrators of the 2021 Oregon Book Award winners said, like, Jen, you won the 2021 Oregon Book Award. So how about that? So look at this.
It's not been embarrassing at all. Okay, good.
We don't have to talk about you if you don't want. So look at this. You did this. You wrote another book, and it's a fabulous book. I've read it. I love it. And not only did you write it, it got published. It's like an actual real physical thing, and it's in bookstores and libraries, and it's in warehouses and trucks and going to people's homes. And like people, even prolific writers, this is not an everyday occurrence. This is remarkable and special. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You did it again. Well done. So I just start, like, tell everybody, because I already know, this is like, as you know, Greg, but as you know, Greg, tell me about the book. What is this book about?
That's the hardest question to answer. So this book is a little bit bridge to Terabithia, finding that magical forest, that magical kingdom in the forest, but not in a depressing way that makes you sob because someone dies, like in Bridge to Terabithia. So it's a little bit that, but I would say the genesis of this book was basically, I love birds. And I had this idea that everyone should get a bird, like bird friend, right? Like in a story, not in real life. In real life, birds should just do whatever they want. Yeah. I think I remember having a coffee or something with Ingrid, who was here, who may or may not be here, but and telling her that I just wanted to do something with birds this time. I think when I lived in LA, which before I moved to Portland, I lived in LA for 15 years. I didn't have much interaction with birds for 15 years because I lived in a city, and none of them really ever stopped on my tiny little porch or anything like that. And moving to Oregon, having a backyard, I feel like I'm discovering birds for the first time practically. They're just amazing, and they have so much personality, and I don't know, I just find myself watching them even more than the cats do at this point. So I really wanted to do something with birds. And then for some reason, I tied that to a story that happened to me when I was a kid, which is that all my friends were getting crushes, and I didn't know what that was supposed to feel like. I assumed was that everyone just sort of drew up a list of all the people that might make sense for them to have a crush on, and they just went down and sort of analyzed which one would make the most sense, and then that's who they had to crush on. So that's what I would do all the time. Just sort of try to analyze and pros and cons lists of who crushes happened on. So those two things ended up being this book in the end. So this book about a bird kingdom where your power comes from understanding your own personal truth. I guess there's one more thing, and I feel like I've already talked too much, but
we're 9 minutes in.
Okay, good. Okay. Was this idea that peer pressure, isn't always recognizable. And I think this is true for all of us. It's true for me even now in my 50s, is that it's really hard sometimes to see where external pressures are coming from. And in movies, they often come from bullies or people who are identifiable as villains. And one of the things I wanted in this book was to not really have a person who is a villain in that way, but the pressures can also come from people who love you and people who want the best for you. But their reality is slightly different than your reality, and no one can see into you. So it is your job and your job alone to figure out what truth is for you and to somehow make sense of it, despite all of the whispers and voices that you're hearing from other people. So does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Kind of, yeah. No, I mean, of course, like we call it peer pressure, but it's like that peer pressure is just one small manifestation of the pressure that all of society and all of human history has sort of put down on us, like, in one pressure, we have all that weight coming down on us, each individual is one pressure point. That's an enormous amount of pressure. And so
Yeah.
especially for a kid to sort of navigate that and figure out who they are, what their truth is, versus the expectations of the entire weight of universal existence, that's a big challenge. And that's one thing that I loved about this book, is you took something that is like, and I think you did the kind of the same thing with A Game of Fox and Squirrels. You took these huge, fraught, difficult issues and managed to make them like universal, but also very specific to each of your protagonists. So I was going to ask you why birds, but you've answered that. So I'm going to actually go on to my next question, which is like, you're an Oregon writer, and you even won an award, like proving that you are an Oregon writer. Last year, you were the best. I mean, the best.
No. Okay. Yeah.
You have an award, right?
All right. I'm not going to argue this point.
So what is it? How does Oregon as a place inspire you, both in life and as a writer? Because you didn't grow up here, you weren't born here, you're a fairly recent transplant. So I feel like Oregon really transformed you in a lot of ways. Talk about that.
Yes, I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, so forests and streams have always been sort of foundational part of me. And living in LA, which I loved LA, I'm not going to diss LA. I really enjoyed my time there, but I started to sort of ache for the color green that you find only in sort of these deep forests. So I sort of ached for it. And then one year I went on a hiking trip with two of my friends, and we found this forest and this trail that no one else was on. And I wasn't feeling well. So I had my friends go on the path, and I just sat with my feet in the creek for, I don't know, maybe an hour. And it was probably the closest thing I would have to a religious experience. Basically, I just thought, this is my soul, like expanding and becoming part of everything around me. And I feel whole in this place. Yeah. And that's when I decided I had to move out of LA and come to a place where I could feel like that on a more regular basis, and not just once every decade or whatever that I end up visiting Oregon. And like, once you have the ability to move and a place like that exists for you, it's, you got to do it if you can. So yeah, so Oregon has meant a lot to me. I feel like it's reconnecting with this sort of primal ideal of beauty and natural beauty, etc. So yeah, I guess that's what it means to me. Also, I love the culture in Oregon so far. In Portland, I have not experienced like much outside of Portland. So I love the idea of work-life balance and of just sort of more of a connection to nature and more of a connection to craftsmanship. And it's not necessarily always about making money here. It's often about finding a craft that you love and just going all in on it, or like making beer, making coffee, or doing whatever. There's just something really different. Every city has a background noise. And it's just very different than the one I had in LA, or the one I had in Maryland, or the one in New Jersey. So I would like to stay an Oregon writer for a while if I can.
Well, I think once you win the award, like that's like basically you have a long lease term on Oregon. So you're good. That's interesting that you brought up the culture of craft and the culture of making and the culture of doing things that are sometimes things that people actually make a vocation out of. But there is something that is not necessarily driven by, you have to do this for your job. So what are some of the things, because I know you are a person of shifting, ever changing, expanding hobbies and obsessions. What are some of the things that you're obsessed about right now?
I feel like this is such a leading question because right next to me, of course, are my like brand new, like 15 fountain pens. And I started collecting them 6 weeks ago. So oops. But I will show off this fountain pen just because this is the fountain pen I bought for this book to celebrate this book. And I bought it because it's clear and it's got iridescence on it. And there's a sword in every Bird of Prince that's called Prism. And whenever you swing it, there's little rainbows that arc behind it. And this reminded me of that. So this is my pen called Prism that is for this book. So yeah, fountain pens. you're to blame for some of them that ended up in the book, Greg, because when the pandemic started, you started playing the ukulele, and then I don't know how this happened, but I bought a ukulele not long after, and one of the characters in Every Bird a Prince ends up playing the ukulele. So that has been like an absolute joy, getting music back in my life too during the pandemic. And of course, I think this is one of your questions later on, but I think that
how did you know that, Jen?
I cheated. For me, it's really hard to write a book. And one of the only ways I can get through a book is if I put as many things that I love into it, and whatever those things are at that moment. And lucky for me, they often change, so I can mix it up. It might be knitting, it might be ukulele, it might be, I haven't even put fountain pens in yet. I'm very excited to figure out how those are gonna, like how pens are gonna figure into some future book. So bird watching and birds and things like that. So I find that whatever your passions are at the moment really help to keep your interest and excitement about a book that you're writing. That will be very hard.
And you're a visual artist, as evidenced by these super awesome bookmarks.
Thank you. I really had fun drawing those. So yeah.
So why is, maybe it's not, how or is writing different for you than your other interests or passions? Because like some of them are like music and visual art, they're creative in the way that writing is a creative thing. So what is it about writing that is somehow different?
Well, partly realizing that I couldn't achieve what I wanted with writing unless I gave it more attention. So I didn't start writing until I was 25. And at that point I had a million hobbies, and I considered myself sort of a jack of all trades. I would just try things and get a little bit good at them and then move on to the next thing. And I don't know what it was. I've always been a reader, right? Most of us have, but I was never a writer until then. And for some reason, it just clicked, like, this is the thing I really want to put time into. And so I actually went through and wrote a list of all of my hobbies and crossed out almost all of them to make room for writing as more than a hobby. So I gave up, like at the time it was like photography and this, and I was doing all sorts of stuff. And I just said, nope, you're allowed. This is now going to take the place of so many of those things. And, I have a full-time job as well. So really had to make room for it. But yeah, I guess I don't know what makes it super different from everything else. Why it clicked, I don't know. Wanting to tell stories is just something I think many of us have.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a large number of writers in the room. I think most of us can sort of understand that, like, sometimes writing just like is the most brightly burning flame compared to like your other interests. And so, you feed the thing that's burning brighter. That's how I think of it anyway.
I do think the other things are important too, because you have nothing to write about unless you're doing other stuff. Yeah. You got to have everything. So, and by the way, everyone, you can feel free to ask questions throughout, and we will grab them.
I have one actually from the audience. I think this is from Ingrid Law, the awesome Ingrid Law. If you could have one bird as a friend, companion, or companion for life, what sort of bird would you choose and why?
Can it be magical? Because
it's your bird, dude, and you wrote a book about fantasy birds. It's your,
I honestly don't know. I think I've always been attracted to books that have animal companions in general, and I think all I ever want from an animal companion is to be a companion, just to have that one like creature that believes in you, that trusts you, that will stay with you no matter what, that you never have to doubt like their loyalty or their love. That's probably why I have cats, I guess, too, because cats are like that. But that's all I really ever want from an animal companion. Right now we've got in my yard, there are about 1 million Steller's jays, which are a type of crow, type of blue jay, type of corvid. And so they're obnoxious. Most people hate them. I just love those guys. I don't know. They have these really cool arched things. So I would pick maybe a Steller's jay, even though they're annoying. I feel like annoying and beauty and like really kind of cool is squad goals for me. So
if I had to choose a bird as my companion, I would pick Pegasus, I think, because you can ride Pegasus.
Yeah.
So you started writing at the age of 25, which I find, I find a little bit old to start writing. I mean, obviously 25 is a baby now, but did
Yeah,
you
it might have actually been closer to 28 or 29. So yeah.
did
Crazy.
you take like creative writing classes in high school or college or any kind of formal training?
No, I did try to take one in college, and it freaked me out, and I dropped it within the drop period. So
Oh,
I was
smart.
like, I have to turn something in, and people are going to read it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't. But I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, so I grew up making worlds and making
Right.
adventures and making characters, and I loved that. And I've always thought, like, some people say they would just die if they couldn't be a writer, and I would just go back to playing more Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So like, I think I'd be okay. I think I would just put a lot of that same type of stuff back into the role-playing games because I really, really, really enjoy that. So yeah, that was maybe my training, was doing that. And that gave me some bad habits. But
Okay.
it also, like what?
Yeah, what bad habits?
Well, it's one of the things I was saying in another event is that, like, I think people's idea of magic usually gets formed in one of two ways. One is they get it from fairy tales, sort of this idea that magic can do anything or be anything and is not predictable and is not consistent. Or you get it from Dungeons and Dragons, where you have rules and you cast spells and you have components and it's going to work the same every time if you do it. D&D is not like that anymore. But anyway, back then, I feel like that's how I grew up, with this sense of world building had rules, magic had rules. And so I go and I start to write books like Fox and Squirrels and Every Bird a Prince. And my editor at the time, who may or may not still be in this call, Tiff was always sort of pushing me to push the boundaries of that, because, we don't need to follow those rules necessarily for kid readers and for books in general. And that was hard for me. I feel like I came from this very structured idea of magic and magic laws, and these books are better for not being trapped in those ways. So that's definitely something I had to sort of push past, and I did not do it by myself. I needed someone to push me past it. Give me a little shove.
Tiffany says that she is here and says hello. Ted Chang says that if the magic system works the same way with predictable results, then it's science.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that? What do you feel about Ted saying that?
I mean, I think Ted's probably right. So Ted's opinion is that magic is the universe recognizing individuals, right? So that the universe reacts differently to specific people. And it's sort of this different way. And I don't really like that idea so much. We're definitely getting off sidetracked here, and I hope Ted never sees this. But I don't like that idea, because I don't like the idea that certain people are born to be better, are born to have magic. I've never really liked that born special trope as much as I like the special because of your attitude and how you try and how you work and how you do all this stuff. I guess I believe more in, the fiction of a meritocracy. I would like that to be the case more than some people are born special and some people have magic, but others don't, no matter what.
It's like you're born rich, but you don't know it yet. So you just need somebody to come across and say, like, here's the number of your bank account. And then it's like, oh, wow, I did this myself. I'm so magical. What makes Every Bird a Prince a Jenn Reese book? And, I'm not fond of talking about author branding, but you are. So I'm going to make you answer the question. Like, what makes this a Jenn Reese book? How is this your brand? Like, what if it were not in this book would make it no longer a Jenn Reese branded book?
I mean, I like to talk about brand in the sense of how we can use it to protect authors and ourselves when we're online. A brand is sort of the parts of yourself that you choose to show to the rest of the world. That's how I feel about brand, and that's why I believe in it. But I don't believe, like, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe all the things about brand that people say. So I don't know always what my brand is. And I feel like that's my editors and publicity team to figure out, because I think it's a little bit harder to see it. For me, though, I think hopeful endings for sure, and created family. So I'm never going to have a story where blood is thicker than water, where who you were born to be is more important than who you make yourself. So I'm never going to have that story. So I don't know. Is that enough?
What about swords? What about swords?
Well, I don't always have swords. I don't. I mean, I would like to, but
Why do you not always have swords? When will you next have a sword? There's like your birds have swords. Little tiny little birds have swords in this, and
yes,
I
there
felt
are like swords in this, but there are no swords in A Game of Fox and Squirrels.
Okay, but not to use the crass capitalistic terms, but I feel like that is like a hallmark of your writing. The fact that if you tell me like the birds have swords, I'm like, yes, that is a Jenn Reese book.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to have action. I like to write action scenes, and I was very happy that I got to write some action scenes in this. So, because I did not really write as many of those in Fox and Squirrels.
So you do, and you're good at action. You've actually written about writing action, whereas my action is just like about as sensical as if I, the person Greg, were committing action, which is ridiculous, and you're most likely to sprain an ankle, and that ends the fight. So it's not even really a hobby, but one of your like lifelong pursuits is martial arts, right? Does that figure into why you like to write action, or did you get into martial arts because you're the kind of person that enjoyed action in fiction?
I think I've always enjoyed it in fiction, and I think part of that is Dungeons and Dragons, right? Which is a very combat-based game, which I imprinted on at such an early age. So I've always liked sword fights and things like that. I practiced fencing in high school and in college. Actually, you can get your gym credits in fencing where I went to college.
Wow.
So I did that. Yeah, so I think I've always liked that. Martial arts, is I think I like to say that I can write action better because I'm so bad at martial arts. It doesn't come naturally to me. Moving doesn't come. I'm not good in my own body. Like for many, many decades, I tried to just ignore it and pretend it belonged to somebody else, or maybe it was just like a mechanical suit I had to wear. And then I started learning martial arts, and I started getting connected to my body because you have to for that sport, for that practice. It's more than a sport. So yeah, so that was a connection, but I'm really terrible. I'm pretty terrible at it. And I think that helps me understand what's happening. So I learn it all in theory. I learn a lot of martial arts in theory, and that helps me understand what's supposed to happen and how things are supposed to work. And then how to explain them for someone who isn't good at them necessarily, which is me, which, I need all of that. So I don't know. I think not being good at stuff is often a superpower people overlook. I'm very bad at many things, and I think this is actually an asset.
Yeah, I think I can write about throwing a punch because I've had to articulate it in my head, like move your fingers like this, move your thumb here so you don't break it, as opposed to just somebody that's got a natural ability. We have a really interesting question again from Ingrid, which is a good question. And I did kind of want to talk about this actually. So thanks, Ingrid. Obviously, we're authors. We don't design our covers, and if we have input into them, it's kind of a nice thing. It's kind of a bonus, but they're never required to listen to us. But to put this in context, both your covers have trees flanking the center main character. And was this part of the plan, or is this a coincidence? And is the universe telling you something about the pillars of your storytelling? Like basically, what do these covers symbolically mean to you? And especially, I think it's a question because they are both like very similar.
Yeah, they are. First of all, I don't have a copy. So can you hold up A Game of Fox and Squirrels? I just want to say that artist is Jessica Rue, who is incredibly talented and I love. And this artist is James Fernhaber, who is also amazing, and you should all check both of them out. So this book, I will say, is specifically a gate. This is called the tree gate that actually appears in the story. And this is based off of two trees on either side of the road up the street from me. And when I was first coming to look at this house, I drove through those trees and I yelled, "Tree gate." Anyone would have done that. Probably they would have stopped doing it, but I have not. So I've been here 7 years and I still yell "tree gate" whenever I go through that, which is every time I leave my house pretty much. So I really wanted to include the tree gate in the book. But I think the reason that both of the books have that imagery is because forests are used as symbols of otherworldliness, right? As as gateways. So in both cases, you walk into the forest and you're in a magical place, you're in a different place. And so it makes sense to have a threshold. I think fairy tales are about thresholds and crossing them. So I'm very happy that both of the books have that type of threshold imagery on them.
Also, I hate to say it, it makes for nice branding. It's nice to have like a consistent visual look across all your books.
Well, I don't think that's going to carry forward, but still, thank you. Yes.
One more, like, 3 is a collection, 2 is just
Okay.
like 2 things.
Okay, I'll work on it. I mean, I was noting to Greg earlier that all of his books, his last 3 books are all dark blue, or medium blue and dark blue. So I was wondering what that said about his brand.
I'm sad. I'm a sad person. Can we talk about some nuts and bolts? Because you said earlier, you said you had these 2 ideas basically, and one was Erin and finding her way in a world of societal expectations of having to pick a crush object, and the other was a bird kingdom.
Mhm.
And so my mind, if I came up with those 2 ideas, I'd say, well, what good does that do me? Because there's no connection between the 2 things. I cannot knit these together. How do you go about the process of discovering the ideas that you're attracted to, discovering the ideas that fit together, that will create an idea powerful enough that you love enough that you're going to want to work on it for like a year or more, plus like revisions and stuff like that. So basically, I guess I'm asking, like, what's your process? What do you do before you actually start drafting sentences?
Okay, well, I imagine there's so many writers here today that I imagine all of us would have a different answer to this question. My answer is that I'm a theme first writer, I guess, is what I'm calling myself. So unlike a pantser or a plotter necessarily, I figure out what I want to explore next in the next book. And in this book, it was definitely like identity and truth and finding that. And as Tiff called it once, a checking in on yourself book. And so knowing that, that's the framework upon which I hang the other pieces or weave them in and try to figure out how it goes. So yeah, it's seldom like, bird kingdoms that could easily be a book without any other pieces. But for me, I really need to know what that through line is, what this sort of like overall picture of the theme is going to be. And that helps me when I'm writing to figure out where layers go, because Ingrid Law, who's also here, once told me that like literary writing was just about having layers, like having more layers, which is still remains one of the most valuable pieces of advice anyone has ever given me as a writer. So
Ingrid's so smart, isn't she?
I know.
What does that look like? What does that process look like? Are you writing lists of characters? Are you writing down like possible themes? Are you writing down questions to yourself? Are you writing down just like plot ideas? What does that actually look like? Or is this
That's what that looks like? It looks like filling a notebook with just like, I have no idea what this book is going to be about. La 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 la. Maybe this, maybe that, and then you do that for like a couple months, honestly. With tidbits and this and that, and then certain things you sort of like cross off the list, and you start to winnow it down a little bit. And I wrote the first version of this book, and I knew it was kind of a mess. And then my editorial team confirmed that. So I would say that, a big part of my process is relying on the other people in the team to help me make, to recognize what the theme is I'm going for and help me figure out how to, reshape that marble or whatever to try to find it. So it's come to think of writing books in a much more, it's a much more mutable thing than I used to think. I used to think the first draft was mostly kept, and now I don't think that anymore. I wish.
I think it kind of depends on deadlines, doesn't it? It's like, I would love to change everything, but it's like, I got 1 month, I can't change everything. So that's maybe more a description of my work habits, though. Than
I was going to say, maybe you're just writing more, well-structured books right from the front. So.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is, no doubt. If I can, Kelly Barnhill, I asked her pretty much the same question about like theme that you actually answered yourself, whether you devise it, whether you discover it. And she defined theme in a way that kind of resonated with me, and maybe it will with you and maybe it won't, but she defines theme as the questions the book asks. And there's no necessary obligation. In fact, it's almost better to not provide those answers for the reader. But you take the questions that the book asks, and if you look at those questions in aggregate, that's how theme reveals itself. If you have to think about Every Bird of Prince in that way, what questions do you think your book is asking?
That is not a question I can easily answer in that, in that context, like right now.
Pegasus.
Yeah. Why don't you go first with one of your books, Greg, and then I'll think about my answer.
Should dogs be loyal to humans? Do humans deserve their loyalty? And if humans don't necessarily deserve dogs' loyalty, what do we owe other people? So that was my turn.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's how I view it. For me, theme is basically an idea that I want to mull around, that I want to swirl around my mug, right? Where the mug is the story. And I want to have a bunch of different characters interact with that theme in different ways and come to different conclusions. So I guess I want to sort of pick apart a theme and, see how many different ways I can explore it. And in that sense, maybe that's what you would say is asking more questions or something like that. In this book, it's sort of, truth, trying to find your own truth. What does that mean? And what does it mean to fight for that truth? And, at what point, how important is it to fight for your truth? Is it easier to not? Is it easier just to go along with what everyone's saying or what people expect of you? I guess that's the central question.
Yeah,
so,
that's a great answer, actually. Because those are like big, important questions, and it's definitely like at the heart of your book. So well done.
Okay. That was really not sure I was going to pull that one out.
No, you nailed it. If anybody has any more questions, we always appreciate having questions.
Yeah.
It makes my job so much easier, and I don't like working hard. What was the hardest part of writing this book? Or it doesn't have to be the hardest part, a hard part, a difficult part. What was challenging?
Man, everything.
The sword fights, really? The action?
Okay, that's sword fights. Well, in the villains, so in the first part of the first draft of the book, the enemies were a bit of ephemeral. I was calling them wind eaters at that point, which I realized doesn't sound super great when you say it out loud. But I was thinking, what sounds like a bad thing to birds? And things that eat wind would be bad because they need wind.
Right.
But that's like a couple mental leaps away. So, so figuring out, let me step back. Figuring out what the right form of the metaphor to maintain the metaphor in a way that's not harmful. So, when you're working with stories about metaphors, for me, you got to staying in control of the metaphor is probably the most important thing, because the last thing I would want to do, my absolute stop writing the book if you can't do this, is cause harm with a metaphor that sort of gets out of control, or I don't follow through the logic of.
I just want to clarify, when you're talking about causing harm, are you causing the actual harm to the reader or causing harm to the narrative, to the...
No, to the reader.
Okay.
Causing actual harm to the reader. Because, when you're dealing, especially with science fiction and fantasy, if you are talking about robots are stand-ins for certain type of people, or, I've got, vicious wolves, or I've got something that's a stand-in for something in the real world, I have to make sure that that thing never breaks, does something that would be harmful, that would send the wrong message if I don't follow through with that theme. So I'm thinking, in a game of fox and squirrels, the fox is a bit of an antagonist. And I was tempted, it's very tempting at times to have the main character just punch him or react physically to him or do something to stop him physically. But because he's a metaphor, or he's a stand-in in some ways for an abusive parent, that is not a safe message to give kids, right? So that's what I mean by staying in control of the metaphor. So that was a bit hard in this book, is sort of just always making sure that I'm stepping back from the magic and asking, what am I saying with this use of this magic or this magical creature? It's never just a magical creature, in this case. There's not always like a one-on-one correlation between things. Things get a little blah, 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 but I want to make sure that if they get a little wonky, it's never to the point where I'm sending an incorrect or harmful message to a reader. In that
So
sense.
in this case, the Wind Eaters became ultimately the Frost Fangs. Right?
Yes.
And what effect do the Frost Fangs mean? What effect do they have on the people in the world of this story?
They
So how
sort
do
of,
you basically solve that? What metaphorically do they mean?
well, one, they are more corporeal. So the enemies are more corporeal so that you're able to actually fight them, which meant a lot of the book could be a little bit more exciting and require fewer leaps when you have a physical creature going on there. But right, so they represent self-doubt, and you fight them by knowing who you are.
Right.
So that's sort of the metaphors I was working with, and I hope I did no harm with that. So we'll see.
Me too. I personally was not harmed, and I hope nobody else was. We do have a question from the audience. What is your daily writing life like? In other words, how do you balance writing and life, if in fact you do? Do you, Jenn? Do you?
I don't think anything has been balanced especially in the last couple of years. I mean, yeah. I just don't know. Yeah. There would be a different question if you'd asked this in 2020, for the previous year or whatever. Yeah. But in this year, I don't feel like most days I write on my to-do list, survive, right? So that at the end of the day, I can check it off. I don't believe that you have to write every day. For me, I'm a sort of like a 100% in one direction type of person. So sometimes I want to write a lot in a burst, and then I want to watch TV or play video games for 3 days straight. So for me, it's a constant struggle to I want to have the sort of life where I'm just like, Ursula Le Guin's famous, this is what I do in my day. I wake up and I do this, and I write from, these 5 hours a day I write, and then I do this, but I want to be that person. I am just not that person. So I'm just didn't get a lot of sleep last night. So today I'm going to nap for 2 hours, and then, I'm going to do a freelance project to earn some money, and then I'm going to maybe hope to write before I go to bed, that type of thing.
I wish I could be like that, because if I don't keep to a schedule, I will basically just screw around for months on end. And just it will never be like the right time to write. It'll always be a much better time to go get a taco.
I think it always sounds better on the other side of it, because you always wish it was easier, right?
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. We're always looking for what is the best, easiest, smoothest, most mentally healthy way to do this. And it's it's an elusive goal. You talked a little bit about not wanting to harm the reader. So my question is what do you as a writer, what do you feel you owe to the reader? Do you feel you owe something to the reader?
Well, I guess I owe that. I owe intention, right? So I owe making sure that that when I'm writing something, that I'm writing with intention, and that nothing appears in the book that I haven't thought about why it's there. And I think when you write for adults, sometimes you can not do that so much. You can just have fun, or you can do whatever. You can be a little bit more secure in knowing that an adult has the tools with which to sort of make their own judgments and come to things a little bit more resilient in many cases. So I think that's what I owe the reader, is just that. But I mean, hopefully I owe them a good story, and I don't know. I don't know. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, I feel I owe my readers the truth. And for middle grade audiences, I owe them hope. With adult audiences, I feel I don't owe them hope. If they get it, good, congratulations, you got something from me. But do you owe something like that, like a truth or a hope or something like that?
I mean, those are things I think I owe to myself. I would not write without truth and hope in my stories, because those are core values for me. But I don't, so I guess I wouldn't necessarily say I owe those to the readers. I would owe those kind of to myself. I don't think that my writing, when I have written things that don't have a shred of truth in them, and those are never my better things. So, yeah.
Nice. We have a question from Sonia Thomas. Can you share what you're working on now, and or a theme you'd like to explore in a future story?
I'm working on a house book right now. I've always wanted to write a book where everything takes place in one big mansion-y type of place. It's got puzzles and things. And that's the fun action-y part. And then the themey part is that I want to explore the idea that we are not in charge of other people's happiness, and that we have to often take care of ourselves, and we can't make other people happy for them. Which I see a lot of people and a lot of kids doing that type of thing. And this will somehow tie together with the house, who is a character in the book, and with the kids and things like that. So that's what I'm working on now. And I just wrote a big riddle for it. And who knows if that will actually stay in the book or not. I don't know. But I'm having a lot of fun with the riddle part.
That sounds like a hoot. Where does this interest in big sprawling houses come from? Did you grow up in big sprawling houses?
Of course not. It comes from reading the Weston Game like every year of my life, pretty much, because I love the Weston Game. It's one of my favorite books of all time. So yeah.
Let's see. We've got a question from Rick. We're looking forward to Every Bit of Prince, but my family is still in love with Above World, as am I. Rereading, sharing with friends. Do you still reflect on your previous work, or do you leave that to your readers? So yeah, once you're done with the book, you just cut loose.
And the same goes. I'm reading this question too. The same goes for Voyage of the Dogs, by the way, your previous book. So, I still love my previous books. What's funny about them is that I wrote the Above World trilogy probably in 2010 through 2012, and because of the way revision works, I don't know the books as well as current readers know the books. So sometimes I will get an email from someone with a question that I have to look up the answer to, because I don't read. There was one I got and I didn't even remember the character. So because I think that character appeared in the final revision of a book. So that's a horrible answer for readers, but most people here are writers, so I'm going to hope that that's okay. But no, I still love those books. I love where I was. I wouldn't write them the same now as I wrote them then, but as time capsules for me as a person, I still love previous work. And what about you with Voyage of the Dogs? I mean, do you still love your older work?
I don't love my older work. I don't love my current work. I don't love my recent work. I don't love my works in progress. The most painful thing to me is having to do a live reading, because I hear my voice saying these ridiculously clumsy sentences, and I regret every choice I made. That said, I do love my broken children very much. And I do think about them though, because I tend to think about my books. They don't necessarily end on the last page. I always give some indication of what will come next, which leads to questions like, when's the sequel coming out? And like the boring answer is like, probably not, because that's a business decision, because my contract is stipulating like standalone books. So I'm scheduled out for the next few years, but I don't stop thinking about them. And also, like when your audience are kids in schools that take them out of libraries, I mean, I get questions about books that are like 10 years old, and the question is usually like, is there going to be a sequel? It's like, I'm sorry, Timmy, that ship has sailed.
I mean, I'm going to say that when I say I love those books, I don't love the sentences. But I love the characters still. They feel like family, right? They feel like a part of me still on the page. So, and I would write a sequel if someone paid me to do that. So, I love the pristine platonic ideal of what the book was supposed to be. And over time, I can maybe convince myself that that's what it actually was. It's only when I start reading it, it's like, oh, it's not that at all. It is not that. So a game of Fox and Scrolls and Every Bit of Prince, they're both about characters dealing with problems, and you could have easily made those contemporary, realistic, mimetic stories, whatever you want to call that. So why do you use the apparatus of fantasy? Why do you lean towards that? So I think there's two major reasons why I lean towards that. One is distance. And that's especially true for a game of Fox and Squirrels, where I wanted to give readers, I'm showing them a sort of a world of domestic abuse and the aftermath. And I don't want to expose them to the harsh reality of that entirely. So I want to give them some distance from it and some warning in some ways to protect themselves, especially if they've experienced it, and it could be triggering, that type of thing. So distance for one. And then second, I think that fantasy is often the best lens for like that we have to see our own lives more clearly. I don't know if anyone else out there has ever experienced this, but I often don't even understand my life until I leave the house. Like I went to the shore for a week like 2 years ago or something, or last year or something like that. And it's like, now I can see my life. You have to step away from it in order to get perspective and see it. And I think fantasy allows us to do that. It allows us to slightly change the way we're viewing the truth of our situation, and maybe help us see it in a new light that is more edifying than the regular harsh light of day. So I guess those are my two answers there. What do you think? Robots, dogs in space?
I mean, your answers are the good ones. I mean, those are the smart ones, I mean, they're true. But also, like, if you can have a zombie in your book, why wouldn't you also have the zombie or the alien or Bigfoot? It's just like, it's realism plus.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I'm going to say I've tried to write fiction without fantasy elements in it. And there's always a point in the first chapter where I'm just like, I need to put dragons, need to put something. It's just, it's part of
it. Like, if you're allowed, I mean, it's not like you're on a visual effects budget. You can put a dragon in it. It doesn't really cost you a dime. Like, so why not put dragons in it?
Yeah.
I'm not dissing any other kind of like genre or form of fiction, but it seems like a little silly to me not to have dragons and Bigfoot in your books. Mm-hmm. Your characters, especially in this book, have fun names. Like, tell us some of your bird names and how you came up with your bird names.
Okay, well, the bird names are just taking bird sounds and trying to make them into names that are both pronounceable and spellable. I was mildly successful on that second one. Prince Orititi, which just sounds like a little bird singing, or something like that, is the main character. And that's one of the names I came up with myself. But then I just crowdsourced, man. I went on Facebook and I was like, who wants to give me a bird name? And then, because my friends are brilliant, I had something like, 100 bird names to choose from, and they were all really great. And that's where Pippity came from, for sure.
Pippity.
Prince Pippity, which I love. And that's a dark-eyed junco, which is one of the birds I get here all the time, which is one of the bookmarks, is a dark-eyed junco. That's
a real bird. That's not a made up, because that sounds made up.
It does sound made up. It is not made up. It is a real organ. It's a bird in many places, but they're the ones most often on my porch. Dark-eyed juncos.
I'll be darned.
And Tikachi is the hummingbird.
Are there any other bird names? Because I'm just having fun, actually. Can you say the bird names?
The woodpecker's name is Bick Bick.
Bick Bick.
Yes, it's just that Bick 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 Bick. Sounded like that. So, but we almost out of time. Did anyone have any questions before we go? I hope I did not say anything ridiculous. I do want to say one thing. Hi, Michael. I wanted to say that the book is very much about created family, and seeing so many people who came tonight who are part of my created family just means so much to me. I could not possibly thank you all enough, because it's really great. Thank you.
Oh, look at all the hearts lighting up. Look at all the hearts.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding.
And thanks for doing this for me, Greg. So
anytime.
It was a really great conversation to hear. Thanks, you guys. And this has been video recorded. I'm going to put it up on our YouTube channel later on for anyone who wasn't able to be here. You can let them know to go there and check it out. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope to see you at future events.
Thank you so much.
It's so nice to see so many lovely faces. I hope I get to see a bunch of you in person sometime soon. I miss you all.
Yeah.